They say numbers don't lie, but did they lie during the 2020 NFL season? A few weeks ago, I heard this stat from JJ Zachariason, who hosts the Late Round podcast. While it is a fantasy football focused show, JJ explained how the 2020 season was an outlier for quarterback play. In fact, 11 quarterbacks averaged over 20 fantasy points per game that season. As a comparison, since 2015, which is 9 seasons of data, only 5.4 quarterbacks per season finished averaging over 20 fantasy points per game. So it had me thinking, what changed during the 2020 season that could have made quarterback play jump in efficiency? And of course, the obvious answer was lack of crowd noise. As we know, during the 2020 season, NFL stadiums either had no fans in attendance or allowed a very small percentage to enter. This took away any added noise or confusion for teams that were on the road that season, and could have led to better stats for quarterbacks across the league. In 2020, 10 quarterbacks had 30 or more passing touchdowns. Since 2000, that has only happened one other time, which was in 2015. In 2020, we saw 10 different quarterbacks have a passer rating over 100, with a minimum of 10 starts. Since 2000, that's only happened one other time, which ironically was last season in 2024. In Pro Football Reference's data page, which dates back to 1922, the 2020 NFL season saw the #1 offensive scoring on average in league history. 2020 also saw the most completed passes per game on average in league history. According to an article on theanalyst.com, from 2020 to 2021, league scoring on average dropped by 3.6 points per game. That was the second largest decline from one year to the next in NFL history. And to no surprise, the 871 total passing touchdowns we saw during the 2020 season still stands as the most passing touchdowns in a single season ever. At the time, the highest amount of total points scored in an NFL season was 11,895 points in 2013. In 2020, the record got shattered by over 700 points, with NFL teams scoring 12,692 total points that year. And the crazy part is, there was almost no difference in points averaged at home as compared to on the road that season. This only happened one other time between 2007 and 2023, which ironically was the year prior in 2019. Let's take a break from stats and numbers for now. According to the players, how much of a difference did no crowd noise actually make? According to Aaron Rodgers, who may have benefited from this more than anyone, it was, quote, a big difference. Rodgers and the Packers specifically saw this work in week 3, when they were on the road playing in New Orleans. Rather than hearing the roar of 75,000 fans in a dome, it was complete silence. This allowed Rodgers to do his famous hard count on the road, got Demario Davis to jump off sides, and eventually lead to a game-winning touchdown. Something that in a typical season would almost never happen on the road in that moment. In this Washington Post article that gave out some great quotes, Ravens former defensive coordinator Don Martindale had this to say: "The quarterbacks, it's like all home games for them." Veteran pass rusher Ryan Kerrigan spoke out about this as well. "Normally for those 8 home games we get each year, we're expecting to have teams go on the silent count, and then we could work to time that up as pass rushers. Without that, teams can really utilize the hard count, really utilize cadence, where you have to play things more honest as a defensive lineman." Aaron Rodgers also believed that the absence of fans was having a negative effect on defenders, who typically feed off of that energy. When you look at which quarterbacks were benefiting the most from that silence, it wasn't like we had awful quarterbacks putting up MVP type numbers. Maybe the one true outlier was Ryan Tannehill, who never really had a full season like 2020 ever again. But what the lack of noise really did was take these already elite quarterbacks and make them about 5 to 10% better. It's similar to the argument for why a player like Barry Bonds or Alex Rodriguez belongs in the Baseball Hall of Fame. The performance-enhancing drugs may have made them 5 to 10% better, but the truth is, they were great baseball players whether they were on PEDs or not. With crowd noise, Aaron Rodgers is still great. With crowd noise, Patrick Mahomes is still great. With crowd noise, Tom Brady was great. I think you get what I'm saying by now. To tie it back to baseball, this wasn't like the juiced ball year from 2019, when all of these serviceable MLB hitters started hitting over 30 home runs with ease and never came close to that again. Yes, Danny Santana, we're talking about you, buddy. Now, I don't want to make this seem like it was all about the crowd, although that was the biggest factor. Things like pass rate being the highest it's ever been, coaches going for it on 4th down more than ever, and penalties favoring offenses more than ever also tie into this equation. To put some data behind it, according to research done at footballguys.com, NFL teams from 1985 to 1989 averaged 514 passing attempts over over a full season. Fast forward from 2010 to 2022, and teams were averaging 559 passing attempts per season, an increase of 45 passing attempts. According to Sportico, as recently as 2017, teams went for it on 4th and 1 just 41% of the time. In 2024, that number jumped from 41% to 71%, meaning we've seen a 30% increase in head coaches' willingness to go for it on 4th and 1. Ironically, one of the biggest spikes we've seen from one season to the next was 2019 to 2020, where we saw the go for it rate on 4th and 1 jump from 54% to 67%. And clearly, converting these is effective. The top 4 teams in 4th down conversion rate last season all made it to the championship round, that being the Commanders, Bills, Chiefs, and Eagles. On Pro Football Reference, their data shows that in 2020, there were 309 defensive pass interferences, 175 defensive holding calls, and 122 roughing the passer calls. If you go back to 2010, it was 194 defensive pass interference calls, 100 defensive holding calls, and 86 roughing the passer calls. And all the way back in 2000, it was 254 pass interference calls, 161 defensive holding calls, and 75 roughing the passer calls. Over that 20-year span, it was a pretty drastic difference, definitely enough to impact scoring around the league. In general, home teams in the 2020 season went under 500, a 127 and 128 overall record per The Athletic. Even sportsbooks had to ditch their usual method of giving the home team 3 points when determining spreads. It felt like a different game in some sense. Now on to Aaron Rodgers. When Rodgers took home his 3rd MVP, the numbers he put up that year were something out of a video game. In fact, Rodgers' 121.5 passer rating in 2020 was the 2nd highest of all time, only trailing himself in the 2011 season. And a stat that's hard to believe, despite Rodgers putting up those video game numbers, Green Bay's offense ranked dead last in pace of play that season, further signifying the unbelievable efficiency Rodgers displayed that year. So was the 2020 season a statistical anomaly for quarterbacks and offenses as a whole? The answer is yes. The league averaged almost a 1.5 more per game than any other season since the 1970 merger, and 23 different quarterbacks had a passer rating above 90, numbers we have not seen outside of 2018. As stated earlier, I don't want to treat this like the NBA bubble and nullify everything that happens, but clearly 2020's NFL was an environment that favored offense, and offense only. And while the offensive shootouts and big stat lines were fun, it just wasn't the same without a packed stadium, and quite eerie at times if we're being honest. That'll do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a like and subscribe if you did, and I will talk to you guys next time.